One day, a man's Ford truck broke down on the highway. The man knew a lot about cars, so he began to repair the truck. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to start the car's engine. After some time, another car stopped and an elderly man got out. This man took a closer look at the broken down car and told the young man, "You have to turn this piece around and the car will run fine." The young man said, "I've been a mechanic for quite a while now. How is it possible that an old man like you simply tells me what to do?" "Just do it," the old man said. The young man listened to him and adjusted the piece just as he had been told. He got in the car, turned the keys, and the car's engine rumbled to a start. This old man who had given him the advice was Henry Ford, the inventor of these cars. We've been talking about the wall of protection that God has placed and given to His people. I'd like us to speak about this creation of man once more. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 29 says, "Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made a man upright, but they have sought out many inventions." That's right, friend. God made man perfect. But what does it say here? That the human being sought out many inventions. Different paths. As we've seen in the previous video, the only thing that the current situation of the world indicates is the human beings want to live without a law. Man sought out many inventions. And what happened? Romans 5 verse 12 says, "Wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." Here, the word of God says that sin entered the world by one man. But I want to ask you a question. What is sin? There may be several answers to this question. But what is the answer according to God's word about what sin is? 1 John 3 verse 4 says, "Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law." What is the biblical definition of sin? Transgression of what? Transgression of the law. James 4 verse 17 adds, "Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good, and doth it not, to him it is sin." So what these two verses, we can understand that God's law has a reason for existence, right? Here it says that sin is a transgression of the law. God gave the 10 Commandments. But now the question is, could sin exist without law? If the law no longer existed, as some argue, will there be still sin? Romans 5 verse 13 says, "For until the law, sin was in the world. But sin is not imputed when there is no law." And Romans 7 verse 8 says, "But sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manners of consequence. For without the law, sin was dead." Wait, what did I say? That without law there is no what? There is no sin. Romans 3 verse 20, first part says, "Therefore by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight." I want to pause here for a moment. Does the Bible then contradict itself? No. Here it says that the works of the law, no human being can be justified. It is not opposing the keeping of God's law. Why? Because we are not saved because we keep the law. We are saved by grace, yes. But obedience comes as a consequence of this grace. This unmerited gift that God freely gives us. In the previous video, we saw that the law of God is the foundation of His kingdom. and a law of love. So then why do we keep the law? Because of the love we have for our God. Romans 3 verse 20 continues saying, "For by the law is the knowledge of sin." What is the purpose of the law then? The Apostle Paul clearly tells us that through the law, through the 10 Commandments, we know what sin is. Yes, on these tables of stone, we are told what we should be doing and obeying. Paul says that I had not known sin, but by the law, for I had not known lust, except the law had said, "Thou shalt not covet." Now, I want to ask you a question. Did Adam and Eve know God's law? Don't forget what I said in 1 John 3 verse 4. Sin is what? Sin is the transgression of the law. Isaiah 43 verse 27 says, "The first father hath sinned." What is sin? Transgression of God's law. Did Adam and Eve know God's law? Of course they did. It is true that it wasn't until the event at Mount Sinai that the law was given to man in tables of stone, but the commandments of God's law were already known before then. Listen to what Hosea 6 verse 7 says. "But they, like men, have transgressed the covenant. There have they dealt treacherously against me." It's saying that people of Israel transgressed the covenant of God. Here it's also telling us that Adam transgressed God's covenant. The question is, what is God's covenant? Deuteronomy 4 verse 13 says, "And he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform. Even 10 commandments, he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone." So let me ask you a question again. Did Adam and Eve know God's law? According to Isaiah 43 verse 27, they did not know the law. According to Hosea 6 verse 7, it says that Adam transgressed God's covenant. And Deuteronomy clarifies that it's the covenant in the 10 commandments. This means that the law originates where? We reviewed this in the last video. God's law is eternal. We see that the law exists so that we may know sin. But as I've mentioned, the law does not save you. Keeping the law doesn't save you. There are many people who appear to keep the law, but who will not be saved. Sometimes we may be doing externally works or have the intentions of receiving a reward, but this should not be the case. Further on, we will see how we should be keeping the law or why we should keep it. But where does the law lead me to then? What is the purpose of the law? Galatians 3 verse 24 says, "Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ." Where does the law lead us then? It leads us to Christ. What is a schoolmaster? A schoolmaster was a servant assigned to a child to take care of him. He was in charge of his education and was to accompany him at all times, to the point that when the child grew up, he had such a close relationship with his schoolmaster that they walked together. This schoolmaster would help the child do things correctly. So, how does the law help us then? It helps us to do this according to God's will. The law is a protection to him who obeys it. Let us not see the commandment as an arbitrary against us. The schoolmaster, the servant that was assigned to the child, would never lead the child to evil. On the contrary, he would guide him so the child could grow up in the best possible way. Likewise, the 10 Commandments are not an arbitrary law that goes against you. No, one on the contrary. It is a law that is in your favor if we simply obey it and let ourselves be led by it. Once upon a time, a man came to Jesus and asked him a question. The story is recorded in Matthew 22 verses 35 to 39, and it says, "Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the greatest commandment of the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love the neighbor as thyself. Here someone asks Jesus what the greatest command was in order to tempt him. But there was a superior answer. Jesus did not mention the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth commandment. He did not mention any of the 10. It seems as if Jesus gave another answer. What was the answer? The first part was that thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart. Oh, so did Jesus remove the 10 commandments and replace them with 2 more? This is not the case. Why? Romans 13 verse 10 says, love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore love is a fulfilling of the law. What did Jesus say that the greatest or first commandment was to love the Lord your God, and then the second was to love thy neighbor as thyself? Why? Because if you recall God's law, it was written on 2 tables of stone. The first table had 4 commandments. The first being, thou shalt not have other gods before me. The second, thou shalt not worship images. The third, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. The fourth, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Right. Here we have 4 commandments. In the first part of the law, it refers to the love that we have or show to God. Because if we love God, we will not have other gods. We wouldn't worship images. We won't take his name in vain. Right? And if we love our neighbor as ourselves, the 5th commandment say, to honor thy father and thy mother, then thou shalt what? Not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not covet. So Jesus did not remove the law. We saw this in the previous video, where Jesus said that he had not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. But Jesus taught us that the reason we keep the law is because we love God and love our neighbor. This is a twofold love. Love to God and love to our neighbor. It is difficult to keep the law. Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's why John 14 verse 15 says, if ye love me, keep my commandments. That's right, dear friend. If we love God and the fulfillment of the law is love, then how are we doing or demonstrating our love? Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Unfortunately, the world is as it is because it rejects God's law. We are like the young man in this car. The person approaching him was the designer of this car. And the one approaching man is the creator of the law. Not for us to do our own will. If we follow the instructions that God has left in his commandments, we will have this wall of protection. We will have joy of being imitators of Christ. Unfortunately, the world is without law. And take a look at the world's current situation. Isaiah 24 verse 4-6 says, the earth mourned and fadeth away, and the world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. Why? Because they transgressed the laws. They changed the ordinances and they broke the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they have dwelled therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. When human beings forget about God's law, there is no path of safety or peace. The Bible says it here clearly. I do not need to give you more facts or statistics. You can look around. Maybe you've been a victim of assault, abuse. Maybe you know someone who goes hungry. we don't need to look very far. But if you decide to keep these 10 commandments, today, as we've seen in this previous video, your peace shall be like a river, and your righteousness as the depth of the sea. May the Lord bless you. Let us invite Jesus, and let us love our God and our neighbors as ourselves.